TikTok, it's time to rock. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special episode here on the channel. It's a show that we've been discussing and planning for a long time, and it's finally my pleasure to introduce to you here with me on the top rung, Bob, a very good friend of the channel, and also, more importantly, I suppose, down there on the bottom rung, but nevertheless, the most important ingredient to this show, Richard Orlando. How are you, brother? Good to see you.
It was very good to see you, and thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yes,
no
happy
problem.
holidays.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to finally get you on here, and I have to say, one of the reasons, the main ingredient for you coming on, obviously, is through the effort of Bob and Jeff. You guys caught up with each other during their book event, so. Bob, yeah, thank you for that, brother.
Thanks for Richard for coming in from the East Coast into Chicago.
Oh, it was great.
That. And it was great to meet Richard. One thing before we start, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we lost a great blues musician this week. In December 13th, late in the evening, Kim Simmonds lost his battle with stage 4 cancer. And he certainly was one of the premier people in British blues, and quite frankly, in my opinion, doesn't get a whole lot of enough credit. I talked to him for a long time. I've known him for a long time, and he certainly was one of the nicest men I've ever met.
Yeah, real shame.
Yeah.
A real shame.
And
I have to agree with you. Thank you for that, Bob.
No, he was a great guy. So everybody should listen to some old Savoy Brown.
Yeah.
This weekend.
That's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. And it was great to meet Richard. And it was really interesting to learn that the connection that we had even before he came to our VIP event at Chess Studios, which was basically Jeff.
Yes. As soon as I thought that I would actually publish the work that I was working on, I knew what my cover was going to be. And it was one of Jeff's photographs. I mean, that was like before I had typed up anything, I knew I wanted Jeff's photo to be my cover.
And once you got in touch with Jeff.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
That's it.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yep. Yeah.
That's one thing that I was surprised to learn, that once Richard got permission from Jeff to use that, 17 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2016. Yep.
Then he started working on the book, and I got hats off. I mean, our book took almost 2 years, but Richard's book is an epic. And anybody who is interested in Fleetwood Mac or Peter Green or any of that era, it's a must. And the best part for anybody in the world, and I'm not getting any residuals, is that you can buy it anywhere because it's an ebook.
Yes, it is available
as opposed to the book
paperback.
As opposed to the book that Jeff and I published. But it is unbelievable reading, and it took you 15 years, right?
About 15 years from beginning to end. Yeah, it just kept on growing. It really took on a life of its own.
One of the things that you got done that Mike Vernon and I couldn't get done is you were able to get in touch with Jeremy Spencer.
Yeah, I reached out to him through his website. I asked him, I had a list of questions, and I think one of the things that worked in my favor was I prefaced my questions by saying, these are questions for you. I'm not going to ask you about Peter Green. I'm just going to ask you questions, about your work and what you did. And what I got a kick out of was when he wrote back, he said, I appreciate that. He says, I'm kind of petered out. And I thought that was pretty good.
That's awesome.
You know, he said, most people come and ask me about Peter. And,
Sure.
you know, I felt like, no, let's talk about, well, you know, your work also. Questions that only you would have the answers to.
And that's a very, very important point, I think, because, you know, one thing that we have to remember as Fleetwood Mac fans, obviously Peter has a role to play in that category of great British electric blues guitarists. But Fleetwood Mac, Bob, you know, it's made up of other great musicians as well. Mick Fleetwood, Danny Kirwan, and we've spoken about this many, many times. Danny Kirwan's vibrato, for example, you know. You listen to the Boston Tea Party album, especially, you know, or the Shrine recording, and you can hear clearly, you know, the individual brilliance that these musicians have, and you know, Jeremy's contribution to that first album, especially, you know, groundbreaking.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's like Marshall Chess said in the interview that we had at the VIP event that Richard got to see. He said, you know, people, you know, he was playing with his idol, J.T. Brown.
Yeah.
And people were like, you know, they said this, you know, little guy who stands, 5'4", and go, he can't play guitar. And then when he played guitar, they're like, holy crap.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you talk to Dinky Dawson, Richard?
No, I didn't get in touch with Mr. Dawson. Yeah, there was a few people I was able to reach out to. Usually it was difficult because I didn't have anyone to kind of be the bridge. You know, here I was, it's like I'm just somebody living in New Jersey, you know, saying that I'm writing a book. They don't know me from Adam. You know, but some people, there were a few people that were able to say, okay, I'll vouch for this guy. And, you know, that kind of got me a little bit further. I was able to get in touch with Mike Vernon that way.
Awesome.
Somebody made an introduction for me, and
that's brilliant.
he answered a few questions. I didn't get to like interview him. I sent him a list of questions, and he answered the ones that he, you know, wanted to answer.
He's a very, very nice man, contributed to our book immensely. And
yes.
We should plug, he's got a new band coming out, actually a new video next week. The band's called Cat Squirrel.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah.
You've heard it, right, Richard?
Yes. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
He definitely has a signature sound. He's a great producer.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Hey, Richard.
I will say that the Spencer's recordings from the Chess Studios, to me, are the best sounding. That came closest to capturing that Elmore James, and not just because he had J.T. Brown with him, but just the sound of that studio, I felt, you know, really brought all of his material to a higher level. I really, really enjoy those recordings.
Brilliant. Hey, Richard, I just want to do a quick shout out to the people watching us live, if that's okay.
Sure.
If anybody has any questions directly that they want to ask Richard or Bob, please put them in the chat, and we'll do the best that we can to get those questions to them. But we've got 20 people watching. I'm going to do a quick shout out to the people that are here.
Terrific.
We've got Jeff, obviously, in the chat, making the first comment. Hi, Henry. We've got Henry here as well.
Legendary Lowenthal.
Tom McCourt's in the chat. Christopher Conklin, thank you very much for the contribution, and also the channel membership, Christopher. Christopher is a very, very active participant on some Facebook groups in regards to Fleetwood Mac, so check him out. Another good channel friend, Hugh Caldwell, is here. Denise, thank you for joining us. Peggy, thank you. I think I know who that is. I think that might be Curtis. Amy, another very good friend of the channel. Thank you, Amy, for hanging out with us. And Teresa from Brazil, thank you for joining us live. And at the end, we'll make sure that we do some more shout-outs. But thank you, guys. Terrific. If you have any questions, please fire them through, and we'll do the best that we can to get them to Bob and also Richard.
That's great.
Richard, what sparked your interest in Fleetwood Mac?
I came to it very late, actually. I was already in my early 30s. And even though I grew up in New York City, and I remember what we used to call freeform radio on FM, where the DJs played whatever the DJ was interested in, uh, I don't ever remember hearing Fleetwood Mac at like in a contemporary time before Rumors. I don't remember ever hearing them on the radio. And I was listening to a syndicated blues show one Sunday morning, and the topic was British blues. And I thought, well, I know, most of what they're going to play. And they played 4 songs by Fleetwood Mac, 2, in fact, from the Chess Studio Jam.
Oh, no kidding.
They played Watch Out and I Can't Hold Out, to Jeremy Spencer. They also played Albatross and Black Magic Woman. And I'm sitting there going, how come I've never heard of these people before? Like, who is this? Like I had a vague idea at the time that Santana didn't write Black Magic Woman, but I'd never heard the original, and I was just completely hooked from those 4 songs. But what was frustrating was at the time, none of the Blue Horizon material was available in the U.S. commercially. And so I went out to, it's like, I gotta buy this stuff. I gotta find more of it, And I'd go to the store, and of course, all I could find was the Buckingham Nicks. Once in a while, a stray copy of Mystery to Me or Future Games, but I could find nothing. Even Then Play On. I couldn't really find any copies.
Wow.
And it took me a while to track down more material. It was something that, like, all right, I'm going to start going to record shows, and there were people that were selling bootlegs. And if I saw Peter Green's name or I could tell that they were older songs, it wasn't Buckingham Nicks. Okay, I'm just buying it sight on, I have no idea what the sound quality is or anything else, but that kind of started planted the seed for the book, in the terms of I'd get these bootlegs and there'd be no information at all as to what these recordings were, where they came from, when they were recorded. And, the ones that did have information, it was usually incorrect, which I found out later on, But as I got further into it, it's like, I want to get this straightened out just for myself, in terms of like, okay, did this come first or did this come later? Was this done for the BBC? Because a lot of times they would say alternate version. Well, it's not an alternate version. It was a performance for the BBC. It wasn't a studio recording. It just happened to be the same song. So that really was what kind of got me started. But it was that initial frustration of like, I can't find anything. How is this possible?
When you started, when you started thinking, okay, I'm going to write a book, did you go, hate to quote Greg Lake, but did you go back to the beginning? Did you go back to the beginning, or did you kind of, it sounds like you kind of started in the middle and then went back?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started, one of the problems that I had was I wasn't even sure of what was available. So, I would be like, okay, I've got all the studio material. Okay, that covers me there. But then the BBC material was coming out like in dribs and drabs.
Yep.
And then you'd get the bootlegs. But again, I was like, is that a live recording? Is it a BBC recording? What exactly is that? And it took me like a couple of years before I was even able to track down the first edition of Martin Selman's biography.
Wow.
And so I like, once I had that discography, that at least I had a frame of reference. It's like, well, I know about these titles. Let me see if I can track these down. And then I would come across a bootleg where, well, that's not listed in the discography. So what else do I not know about? And that's one of the reasons why it took me so long, because once I was into it, it's like, well, I don't want to go off like half cocked and say, well, here's all of the recordings, and then find out, well, what about these 20? What do you mean? What about these 20? So towards the end, I had made quite a few contacts across the globe, and people were able to, send me recordings that I wasn't aware of. And there were a couple of times where I thought, okay, I got them all now. And I start to format everything and try to lock it down. And I would get an email saying, hey, I just got these recordings. And it was kind of like, okay, do I like just pretend like I don't know about them, or do I add those recordings into the book also, so I can make it as complete as possible? And once it was, I knew it wasn't going to be a single volume. It's like, I'm going to go for as complete as possible, because I feel like if I'm going to do it, it's a one-shot deal. I mean, I did give myself the cutoff of 1971 with Peter Green's material, because if I even thought about going past that, it's like, no, I'll just never finish. I'll just keep on doing this, and I'll end up with an encyclopedia set instead of.
Well, and there's still stuff coming out that probably is, since your books have come out, that, I mean, with the resurgence of blues or Peter Green and Christine McVie's passing and all that, and like you said, I mean, that's a bet I've used since high school. Who wrote Black Magic Woman?
Yeah,
I mean, most people don't know that, sadly.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But like, when the John Mayall tapes were released, that was a huge thing, because that was just a big black hole.
Yep.
It was like, I would write in the book, okay, and he played with John Mayall between these years and these years. We have the studio recordings. I think it's 5 BBC recordings, but that was it. And then all of a sudden, no, there's 3 CDs worth of material. And it's like, wow, that is a major, major, piece of the puzzle that needs to be, included here. So it's like, okay, go right back to the beginning and start to include all of that,
Did you find yourself doing that through decade and a half? You must have found yourself going back and forth like that, like a ping pong ball.
And sometimes it would be just like a single track, like the BBC recordings. You'd have, you'd find a listing showing that, okay, they recorded 5 songs on this date, for this broadcast. 3 of them are available. And you're like, well, what about the other 2? Did they just disappear? And luckily, most times over the years, those missing tracks, someone would send them to me. I mean, that was the thing that really struck me when I started the project, was how generous people were. And again, I mean, this is just through, via the internet, just, emails and things like that. I mean, I originally was trading cassette tapes with people, but people like took it seriously, and they were like, hey, I've got this recording. Do you have this? And they'd send it to me. And, I have this huge collection of CDs, and again, a lot of times they were just like a mix, of recordings. It wasn't a lot of studio outtakes. It was usually BBC tracks or live tracks. Yep. And the hard thing with the live tracks was when there was no reference, it's like, okay, what is this?
Right.
Is it a song from a show that I thought was complete, and this was one that for whatever reason wasn't on the CD that I have? And some of that, I mean, there is a section at the back of the book of recordings that I just was not able to identify definitively, and I had to say, it's like, well, yeah, this is the live recording, but I don't know when or where it was made, And those were kind of frustrating. I mean, did my best to track it down, but some of them just eluded me. In terms of
Well, the detail you have in the books is simply jaw-dropping. It really
thank
is.
you.
And it was really amazing, Andrew, too, that Richard's talking about how he's reaching around the whole world, but he didn't meet any of these people until he came to Jeff and I's VIP event. Jeff's, he met some of these people that he's
Yep.
been talking to for 15 plus years.
Yeah. That was a wonderful thing. I mean, there were people that were, I mean, just tremendously helpful in terms of providing me with material, and like a first reader, someone who I kept sending stuff to, like, could you just tell me, does this make any sense? Stuff like that. And I had originally hoped to literally hand deliver copies of the books to them to say thank you. And it just turned out like one person was in California, I'm on the opposite coast of the US, somebody in Britain, I had friends in Sweden, and it was just like, I don't have the money to go jetting around.
But Andrew, Richard and I have been talking, and I'm glad I was able to talk you into coming on your show, Richard. But one of the things that Richard was able to do is he did get his books to Peter.
Yes, that someone got me an introduction to Joe Green, his nephew. And I, when I wrote to them, it's like, I'm sure he must get letters all the time from people who want to meet Peter Green. And I wrote to him and I said, look, I wrote this, this series of books, and I would really love for your uncle to see that, this is how much his music meant to me. I said, you can give me the address of an office building. I said, I'm not going to show up at your door. I promise you, this is legit. And he sent me the address, and I was able to get the books mailed to Peter Green. And Joe Green was kind enough to send me a photograph of Peter Green looking at the books. And that's like one of my real treasures is knowing that he got to see them. I mean, I'm sure he would be embarrassed by that, the whole idea, just because of the way he was.
Right.
He was very, very humble. I mean, for lack of a better word. And he would probably be like, well, why did you do that?
If anybody's watching on a replay, I'll attach a link that has that photograph. If you haven't seen that photograph of Peter looking at the volumes of the books, which is the back screen there, ladies and gentlemen, of this show. It's a wonderful photograph, and I remember when I first saw it, it was without being lack of a better word, it was an emotional photograph.
Yeah. It was for me. Yeah.
There's some questions coming in from the comments. Do you want to read those, Andrew?
Yeah. There, in particular, and in no order, but this one here from Anders, who's a very, very good friend of the show, and he's also active on a lot of other Peter Green Facebook groups as well. Good to see you, Anders. Thank you for joining us. But he's asking a very, very, very interesting question. I don't know whether you can see that, but the tapes from the
That's
Munich.
why he's laughing.
As far as I understand, nothing has ever surfaced. If anyone has them, they're keeping them private. I mean, that was one thing that I kind of tiptoed around that whole period, because there was no way for me to make any type of definitive statement because I don't have any information about that. Okay. I've seen Peter Green's son did an interview with I'm blanking on the gentleman's name right now, but the one who ran the commune. And no mention was ever made about the tapes. And that's one of those things that I feel like if they were out there, someone would have bootlegged them by now. I mean, not commercially released, but they would have been in circulation somehow or another. That's one of those things. I don't think they exist anymore, or if they do, it's in a private collection, and that person has no intention of making them available.
And Richard and I have talked about the Munich incident, and the much to do about it. I think we're both in agreement that that was just another step down in his life. Whether that was the stepping stone to where he went up or not, who knows? He would have been there anyway because he was he had a disease.
Yeah. I mean, that again, when I first was beginning the research, the standard line was that he was never the same again after that night. And then as I got to hear more and more of the live shows, it's like, no, it wasn't like a light switch like that at all. Some of the latest shows are some of the best playing that he did, and he was functional for quite a while, at least musically, after the Munich incident. Now, whether it was something that was just dormant and it manifested itself later on, again, I wouldn't even pretend to pass an opinion on that, because I don't.
And paranoid schizophrenia does manifest itself in your 20s usually.
Yeah,
so
right.
You're right about that.
Right, but did it have anything to do with what happened that night? I don't feel comfortable, even expressing an opinion, because that's way above my pay grade.
One thing that we have to say, and otherwise you're going to get in trouble, Richard, is that your wife because I talked to her at our event, had a huge hand in what you did with your book.
Oh yeah. No, I could not have done it. I mean, aside from all the people that contributed, I could not have done it without my wife. She was very patient with all the many, weeks and months and years that, all right, I'm going to be in my room. And we had a small son at the time, and it's just like, yeah, make sure he stays out of the room so I can work. Thank you very much.
And I can tell you, Andrew, that Andrew's wife and I Richard's wife and I, but basically double teamed him to get him to do your show.
Oh, fantastic. No, we appreciate you doing that, Richard, because like I say, the community that we have here in Fleetwood Mac fans is a community that's growing, and I'm seeing that on social media. And obviously the information that you have in your books, again, if people aren't aware of that, and if anyone's watching this back on replay, because we get a lot of people watching our shows on replay,
right?
If you wanna get access to 3 volumes of articulate research on a great subject, check out, please, and I mean this sincerely, check out Richard's work. And one of the reasons why it shines in the dust and the drabness of other musical books out there, it's because it's written from a fan's perspective. And that's always, Bob, that's always going to be a defining point for a lot of us. If you love the music, if you love the artist, if you care for it, it's going to shine through, isn't it, in the first couple of sentences? And that's definitely what Richard's book does. It's a trendsetter, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be a defining publication for fans like us, much like reading through Bob's
nice segue.
and Jeff's book here with their interviews. You can see clearly, the respect and the tenderness that people are showing towards, Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac.
Very true.
And that music. So, well done, Richard.
Thank you. And absolutely about the Bob's book with Jeff. It is absolutely tremendous. You will find I'm just seeing Chris Conklin's comment. That's my friend. Always got my back. it really is like I wrote a review for it, and it
thank you for that.
comes from the heart. It is just such a pleasure to listen to the double CD and look through the book and read the
Correct.
comments. It's a fantastic experience. The event itself, when my wife and I went, we had a great time, and it was so nice to actually meet Jeff and Bob. When I got my copy of the book, I didn't know what to expect, and it was beyond what I had hoped for, and it really was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Richard,
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. We've had
Sure.
on our channel, besides Bob and Jeff talking about their book, we've had other authors come on and talk about some of their books. And one thing that's always fascinating from people in the chat, you know, if we're guitar players, we know the process of what it's like to learn a guitar and play a guitar and try and do some music or copy some music. So you as a writer, what's the process that Richard goes through as an author? Is there a period where you have to psych yourself up, you know, and find this creative moment, or do you just go and lock yourself into your writing room and don't come out after 6 hours? Can you share with us your how you do that, please?
And,
Sure.
and Richard, remember, it's a family show.
Yeah. Another one. One of the things when I first started, without thinking of it in terms of a book, it was so I could, for my own self, document the music as best as I could, and get it into chronological order and whatnot. And when I started to think of it in terms of a book, now I cannot play any instruments. I wish I could. And I felt like, okay, so how am I going to write about the music if I can't say, okay, well, then he went from a D to an E, or, anything like that. So for myself, it was like, okay, how can I put into words what the music means to me, what I'm feeling when I'm listening to the music. Like, I can't tell you what he's doing, but I can tell you how it made me feel. Wow. And hopefully you'll kind of go, well, yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. I mean, everyone's going to come to it differently. There's no two ways about that. But so for me, it was a way to try to find somehow to describe what the music is bringing across to me. And one of the things that made doing the book actually feasible was, as more and more bootlegs came out, live shows, there were a lot of songs that they played almost every night. So it's like, okay, by the time I got to the 10th or 15th version of a song, what can I say? I have to find that. But especially with Peter Green's work, he never played it the same way twice. So I had no problem, finding, because each time I'd listen to a new performance, it's like, wow, okay, he didn't do that the last time. This time he did this time he did that. And it really, it gave me a deeper appreciation of the music and what these guys were actually capable of. The fact that, like, well, no, we don't just go out and play rote every night. The only song where they never played any variations, and I think there's only one version where he put in a little filigree at the end, was Albatross. Yeah, Albatross was like, nope, we don't screw with this. We're not going to improv anything. Albatross gets played straight every night, and that was like the one rule that Peter had as far as that goes.
But you bring up a great point, because Ainsley Dunbar said in our book too that he's played with so many guitarists, and he said that's what he got sick of, is that every guitarist, same song, same night, same solo. and
Yep.
that Peter never did the same
Yep.
solo.
Yep. And
But he
it
did
was,
the same songs.
yeah, and it was just terrific. I mean, like you listen to something like even as simple as Long Gray Mare. Like I think it was within a 6-month period when the first album came out. There's like 4 different versions, and one he plays the whole song on harmonica. The next one's a guitar version. One is he rips through it like in 2 minutes, and the other one he took it nice and slow. It was just an easy, but it was just like every time he played it, he transformed the song.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, that's what makes it interesting. It's not like, okay, well, I've got the studio version and now I've got 3 more that sound exactly like the studio version. It's like, no, I didn't feel like playing guitar on that when I recorded it the next time. I'm going to play it on harmonica.
Didn't you find too, with along those same lines, when Kerwin joined the band, didn't you see Peter going, okay, I can do this, but no, you're going to do this?
Yes. Yep. It's like, yeah, he definitely gave everybody their space to create. And I wonder if he kind of picked that up from John Mayall, from his time with John Mayall, because Mayall was also extremely generous, with whoever he brought in. It's like, okay, this is your solo, this is your number, like with Eric Clapton, Peter Green, Mick Taylor, everybody did an Otis Rush song. Everybody had a Freddie King instrumental, and it was almost like when they came in, you wonder, like, did Mayall say, okay, which one would you like to do? Because there's gonna be a moment in the show when you're gonna do a Freddie King song, or you're gonna do the Otis Rush song, or I'll be doing the vocal and you play the guitar. What do you want to do? Which one would you like to do?
I think that's a really interesting analogy. He probably did learn that from John Mayall.
Yeah, I mean, it might not even have been conscious. It was just kind of like, hey, I appreciated what he did with me. I'm gonna do the same thing with Danny.
I mean, that's true on Then Play On. I mean, or Oh Well. I mean, let's face it. He could have. I mean, Then Play On is almost a solo disc for Peter Green, but he really pushed Danny into the spotlight, which is probably why, as you and I know, we were talked many times before, that Peter was blaming Danny's demise on himself because he thought he was too young.
Yeah. That was another unfortunate case, really, for Danny, that he just couldn't handle it. Yeah, that was a shame.
Yeah, I think he is I mean, both stories are very sad, but he's a very much an unsung hero.
Yes.
And you brought up the 70s Fleetwood Mac, which inevitably comes up, but as I say in my forward, Danny Kerwin got them into pop music. Listen to Jewel Died Judy, Station Man, through Future Games and Bare Trees. I mean, that's power pop.
Yep. And those, I mean, for me, that was the end of the era for I mean, that's just a personal taste. There's nothing wrong with the others, but that's just not my preference. But Kerwin's stuff, absolutely with Fleetwood Mac, and that's something that I've toyed with following through on, to maybe do a volume, taking Danny Kerwin, Christine McVie, and Jeremy Spencer up to like pretty much when Danny left Fleetwood Mac.
72.
Yeah, like just to cover those songs, because I would like to, explore them more for myself, and there was.
Please do.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. But getting back to Then Play On, and it's interesting, and thank you, Bob, for bringing that album up, because we've ranked that album, on the channel, and would love to come back and revisit that with you in the new year with Richard and Bob. I know it's Bob's Desert Island album, and I know Richard has a soft spot for that album too. So I'd love to talk about
Absolutely.
each track, you know, live with you guys. But it's interesting. I don't think the history on that album has been written yet. You know. Just can I just ask you guys a couple of questions
Sure.
in relation to that album? So this album is an album of what could have happened with this band. Though you know the glimpse that we got, the two guitar band, you know, coming through, and how that was influential on a whole lot of other bands after that album came out. But Bob, especially this album, you know, gave us a sniff, didn't it, of the world dominance that this band could have done after that album, if the stars had all aligned, Bob.
Right. I mean, there's so many. I mean, to me, like, although the sun is still shining. I mean, the Danny Kerwin song. I mean, that's like a George Harrison song.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous ballad.
Yeah.
You know, we're having a jam in February in Evanston, Illinois, and one of the songs we're going to do is "Oh Well." And Curtis Meisner, who's been on your channel, and I were talking today, and he had a great idea. He's like, you know what, he's doing the opening on a nylon string acoustic, just like Peter did.
Yeah.
That album, to your point too, I also think, and I'll ask Richard this, you should bounce off of this. The jams they had, which was, you know, the complete ones in the vaudeville years.
Yes.
That's one thing that Peter was getting frustrated with the band with, because he wanted to, you know, for the lack of a better analogy, you know, jam like the Grateful Dead.
Yes.
And those jams were like that. And he thought that John and Mick were maybe not capable of where he wanted to go.
Oh, absolutely. You know, at the event, you had the taped interview with Mike Vernon,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about how at the chess sessions, John McVie was going to play what John McVie was going to play, and he really didn't have any interest in what anybody else had to say. And I think at the time that Mick Fleetwood was with Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, I was never really a big fan of his drumming. I felt that he would lock into one beat and kind of stay there for the length of the song, and those jams needed a lot more fluidity than John McVie was willing to give, or Mick Fleetwood was able to give at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a completely different approach to what they had been playing. And I could see where Peter might have been, you know, because Danny could follow him wherever he went. I don't think Danny had any problem. Whether he was interested in that, that's a different story. You know, I think Danny, I don't know the man. I never met him, but I would get the feeling that he preferred a more structured feel.
He was a perfectionist.
You know, he could, like I said, he could follow Peter if he was like, okay, we're going off on this tangent. All right, I'll follow you, no problem. But as a personal preference, I think Danny preferred a song rather than a free-form sound. Okay. But, you know, had there been more communication between the two, between Peter Green and Danny, I think they could have really gone places that we couldn't even have imagined at that time.
Yeah, the only song that they penned together legally copyright-wise is World in Harmony,
mm-hmm.
which you can tell which part who wrote what.
Yep. And again, if you listen to the live recordings, Peter's little break in the middle is never played the same way twice.
Right. I was just thinking that.
Yep. You know, and Danny's is kind of like, no, this is the opening and this is the closing. All right, Pete, go and do whatever you're gonna do, you know.
Well, isn't that why he got in a fight with Bob Welsh, Danny, because of tuning? And
yes,
that evening that he was fired. I mean, he got so frustrated he threw his
Yeah.
guitar against the wall.
Yeah. I'm sure that had been building up for a while. I don't think it was a sudden thing. And
Yeah.
and where Danny's headspace, I'm sure, didn't make things any easier.
No.
There didn't seem to be a lot of. I mean, the fact that they made such amazing music, and yet there's interviews with Christine where she says, Danny was just really hard to work with, and yet look at what you accomplished. Imagine had everybody, had a more open sense of communication. I mean, that to me is stunning. That, like, okay, so everybody kind of did their own thing, but you still managed to do this.
But on the other hand, that's sometimes what makes bands great, when you have the angst.
Yeah, they come in
strong personalities disagreeing with each other. That can make for some of the best record. I mean, Peter Gabriel's most popular record was when he was going through his divorce.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And look at Fleetwood Mac's, the disco version of Fleetwood Mac, Rumours, what was happening with the band members there. Richard, I've got a couple of questions I want to fire to you. Tom asked a question about the Cold Sweats quote from B.B. King earlier. He can't find that. Do you have an opinion on that? I'm sure we all do, but we'd love to hear your opinion. Also, he's got another question there that I've highlighted, and I'd just like to take a quick little opportunity and do a couple of quick shout-outs to Bent Tom in the chat, who is acknowledging you both as knowledgeable guests. So thank you, Bent.
Thank you.
And also,
we got him fooled, Rich.
and also Brody Hutchings is in the chat, a very, very dear friend of the channel as well, who's going to be on our Christmas show later. He's a Clapton Fleetwood Mac nut too, so
cool.
knows this era, loves this era just as much as we all do. So yeah, those questions, please, Richard, if you want to take that opportunity. Thank you.
Sure. The Spring '71 tour. I have only heard what I assume most of the people who have tried to track these down have heard, and the sound quality really is pretty bad. And that was one of the things that could be frustrating when I was doing the book, was putting on the headphones and trying my best to hear what they're actually doing through this hailstorm of static and noise. There's one recording from the 71 tour. I believe it was almost the end of the tour, where it's just literally unlistenable. I mean, thankfully that was the only one I came up against where it's like, I can't even give you an opinion on this because I can't hear anything. It's that bad. It was just, I mean, I don't know how a tape gets to sound that bad. It's like, what the heck happened here, but yeah, I mean, I've searched high and low for, and I have multiple copies of various live shows in various stages of sound quality. And one of the things that I thought was unfortunate was when you started seeing all of these commercial releases coming out of, like, the Fillmore shows, New Orleans. These were all radio broadcasts where the copyright has now expired after 50 years.
Yep.
And as far as I can tell, none of these labels, I mean, they could be all owned by the same company for all I know, has even made any attempt to try to better the sound than what's been in circulation for the last 20 years or so, 30 years or so. And that I think is unfortunate, that there's not even an attempt made to try to boost up the EQ, something.
Sure.
I mean, there should be better ways to hear these.
Well, I think that the question, if I may, is that when he replaced Jeremy Spencer left, I think the questions that people ask online are because you see some pictures of Peter Green approaching a microphone
Right.
He jammed for 2 hours. He wouldn't sing anything. He'd only do Black Magic Woman, no jams, which seems like completely untrue. But I mean, the recordings you hear, I mean, he basically just played rhythm guitar.
Yeah. 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 He let Danny take most of the leads, and I mean, and that I think was, a very conscious decision where, and in some ways it was better for the band because it's like, look, I'm only here to cover these dates. You people bought tickets to see this particular version of Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, it might be cool that I came back, but the next time you see them or the next recording you hear is not going to sound like this. So for him to come back and say, okay, we're playing all of my songs, well, that's not what people were expecting to hear. They were promoting a new album. And, I think in some ways it was actually the wiser choice for him to kind of stay in the shadows, because it's like, well, yeah, now it's Danny Kerwin and Jeremy Spencer and Christine, McVie. It's not Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac.
But Richard and Bob, that's precisely why I love this about Peter. It's so anti-rock and roll. He turned away from, and we were just talking about this earlier, from what could have been with them play on afterwards.
Yes.
Global domination of the music of the rock and roll world, and how he just basically effortlessly decided, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, most people would not be able to walk away.
Yeah.
just out of ego. I mean, they were definitely kind of kneecapped, so to speak, with the lack of promotion they had in the U.S. From their label. But saying that, the fact that there are so many live bootlegs available, that there was, like, right from the start, there was a core of people who were like, this band is just amazing, and I'm going to make my own recordings when I go to see them, I think speaks such volumes that they could actually tour the States as many times as they did. And they had an eager audience. And yet, like I said, I grew up in New York, which is a major market as far as the media.
As anything.
Yeah, and I never heard of them. I mean, it was just like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted.
So who were the people, Bob and Richard, in '69 listening to Fleetwood Mac in America? Can you describe who were the people going to the gigs, to the Boston Tea Party?
Go ahead, Rich.
I think these were local people who saw them once. Maybe they opened up, for another act, and were just like completely blown away. I mean, there's one bootleg from the Fillmore East where you can. In some ways, it's frustrating because the person who was doing the recording is kind of keeping a running commentary during the show, but he's like, as soon as they start playing a song, he's like shouting out the name, and it's like it was only out like a week or so. And yet this guy, he kept, and throughout the whole show, he's calling for "Oh Well." Like from the first song until the last song, you can hear him screaming, like hoping they're going to hear him on stage, and I'm sure he's up in the nosebleed seats, and he's screaming for "Oh Well." And it wasn't even a single at the time. Wow. So it's like, okay, here's a guy who was completely all in on this band. Like this was his band, whether or not it got radio play or not. And he brought a friend with him because, you could hear him talking to the other person, about, oh, now they're going to do this song and this, and it's just like, again, like with Boston, I think they had a real hardcore group, and the same thing out at Fillmore West. People saw them and were like, if they're on the marquee, I'm there. Like, it doesn't matter who else is on the bill. I'm going to see Fleetwood Mac, because these guys were just, amazing. And
it's not an unusual story in music too. Just like Hendrix had to go to Britain to get popular here
yeah,
in the States. In '69, which is what our book's about, and Richard can attest to, Fleetwood Mac, aside from the United States, was selling more records than the Beatles.
Yep.
Matter of fact, and we've talked about this in season 2 or episodes 2 of Get Back. John Lennon talks about seeing Fleetwood Mac on TV.
Yep.
And somebody with a lot of time on their hands noticed that Billy Preston has a Need Your Love So Bad Blue Horizon 45 on his piano. And there's I don't know, Rich, we've talked about this, that I forgot his name, but there's somebody on YouTube, a rapper, who listens to songs that he's never heard before. And he's done a couple Fleetwood Mac songs, and one of the songs he did was Man of the World.
Yes.
And he's listening to it, and he takes his headphones off, and he said, if you're depressed, do not listen to this song. He puts the headphones back on, and the guitars come back on, and you know what I'm talking about, because we've talked about this, Richard. And the guitar solos come on between Danny and Peter, and he takes the headphones off, and he goes, this is making it worse. And that's, I think that's what, because I've been asked, and I'll ask you, Richard, which is a really hard question to answer. I mean, what, you can say Clapton or Mick Taylor or Peter Green or Satriani or Eddie Van, whatever floats your boat. But what is it about Danny Kirwan, Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green that gets to you?
That is a hard question to answer, because one of the things that struck me was, here, like for myself, like I said, I was like in my early 30s already, and I heard 4 tracks, very different. Three were mainly, featuring Peter Green, and then the one Spencer track. I didn't even hear a Danny Kirwan song. I didn't know who he was when I heard these. And yet, just from those 4 songs, I was determined to track down more music from this group. And in doing the research, I've come across so many people who, once they hear a few songs, they're all in, and it's like, well, that's why I was able to find people sending me different bootlegs, and because once you're in, you're all in. It's not like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. That's good. I got one album of theirs, or it's like, no, it's just something that hooks you on an emotional level, and it's interesting. I can't think of anybody else that really did that to me, where it's like, I have to be a completist here, and not just for the sake of being a completist, but I really want to hear everything that was done.
It's interesting that the couple tracks that you first heard were from Fleetwood Mac in Chicago.
Yep. 2 of them.
Did it impress you at all? Did you know at the time that those were done live?
No.
In the studio?
No. And they really didn't give that much of a background, because it was like an hour-long show, and he covered, the bands that I expected to hear, the Blues Breakers, the Yardbirds. He brought it up to like Led Zeppelin. That was kind of like where they ended the show. Jeff Beck, he played some of the Jeff Beck group stuff, and again, all of that I was familiar with.
Right.
But these 4, it was like, who the hell is Fleetwood Mac? I mean, like, I know Fleetwood. I know that's not the Fleetwood Mac that I've heard. I was like, what is going on here?
So, and you contributed to our book, and Jeff and I thank you again for that. But it seems like everything that I did in research is that Peter Green really, really wanted to prove himself as a blues player, and the only way to do that was to play in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah. That apparently was a real milestone for him. They talk about that when he was with John Mayall, he talked about going to Chicago. He wanted to go and jam, with these guys in the clubs and stuff. And it was Mayall's girlfriend at the time, I believe her name was Marcia Hunt, was from America. And she was like, you don't want to go to Chicago, especially not by yourself. She just felt like this guy is such a babe in the woods. They're going to eat him alive. She just couldn't see it. And she basically talked him out of it. And I guess for our benefit, worked out well that, he did stay in England, and he did eventually leave Mayall and form his own band. But he wanted to go and see what was going on over in Chicago, but he was talked out of it.
And it sounds like from Dinky Dawson's book and from what you and I've talked about is that when he did, after they did 18 songs in a day and then they went and did a gig, which is incredible in itself, considering how long it takes for somebody today to do one song.
Yes.
That he really did prove himself when Otis Spann and Willie Dixon took him to that club that evening in Chicago.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure the audience was quite taken aback, because visually they're like, are you kidding me? I don't think this guy's going to be able to play,
Yeah, because he was not a big person.
Right.
Statue-wise.
Exactly. And the way that he would present himself, he didn't come off as this strutting like, all right, everybody, fasten your seatbelts because I'm going to blow you away. He just went up there with his humble self. You look at the picture that Jeff took, and it's just like, yeah, this guy's not trying to prove anything to anybody. He's not putting on an image, and it's just like, well, just listen to me for a second. And then there's nothing more that needs to be said. From those first notes, it's like, okay, I made my point. And again, and it's not even that he comes across that way. He plays and trusts that they'll hear what he's doing.
Right.
And I think that's really what makes him so humble. It's not like, okay, now watch what I do. It's like, no, I'm going to play and let's see what you think of it. I hope you like it.
Were you surprised to learn when you were doing your research that the bass solo on Green Manalishi was not John McVie?
Yeah. There was so much that I had no idea of, that once I started getting more in, because again, it was difficult even finding information, and then if it was a bootleg, if I found information, half the times it wasn't correct anyway. So, I had to go back and kind of redo that, so to speak, But yeah, he really wanted to push that. You listen to some of the live recordings of Manalishi when he started playing the bongos and the bass guitar, and he just wanted to do something different, and I give him a lot of credit for that. That see how far you can push it, and if it's not working, it's not working. That's okay, but I'm gonna give it a shot.
Some questions and comments from the audience there, Andrew?
Someone asked who was listening to Peter, Danny in their heyday here in San Francisco. Lots of budding guitar players would religiously apparently go and hear the band. They influenced so many future guitar players. So I think that's an interesting comment. So like a lot of bands, Bob, and a lot of acts, Bob and Richard, over the years that we've seen, there was a period, I suppose, where they were underground, before the official established media grabbed hold of them and said, this is who you need to listen to. So that's an interesting comment. Thank you, Denise. Thank you.
They're also one of the first bands, if I'm not mistaken, if not the first band to have 3 guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
far as I can tell, absolutely, absolutely.
Even though there was a period, Richard, and I'm sure you can confirm this, that there was a period where Peter would not play on stage with Jeremy, or Jeremy was playing piano and not guitar,
right,
or
right.
maracas, and he was not playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that Spencer didn't play more piano, because I always enjoyed that extra sound. Um, I felt it added a lot to the sound, and I think on a lot of the bootlegs he might have been playing piano. You just can't hear it; they weren't mic'd.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, he was on stage with them, he was playing piano, but you can't hear it, which is unfortunate.
Right.
So getting back to a question earlier that Tom asked about the cold sweats quote, we didn't answer that question, Bob and Richard. So
what I've read is 2 quotes. One's not very PC.
It's okay.
Is that he said that Peter Green was the only guy that gave him the cold sweats.
Mm-hmm.
He also said, and Richard's smiling because he knows what I'm about to say. He also said, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've read it, and Richard's, I think, read it, is that he was a black man turned inside out.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been told too over the years.
Either way, each one is a humongous compliment.
Yep. Yeah, someone, there was a long thread on one of the Fleetwood Mac pages where somebody, I believe, did track down the BB King quote. I mean, it's been, cited so many times now, and it really was. It's not like word for word exact, the one that the person tracked down, but it was basically the same thing. I mean, it was close enough that you could say, okay, he's paraphrasing. But yes, that was BB King's opinion. And I always thought that it was a shame that Peter never really had a chance to work with BB King. I mean, they say that they jammed on the one tour. We have the Royal Albert Hall bootleg, but it's just Fleetwood Mac's set. And supposedly they would jam at night, at the end of the show, because it was, I believe, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, Duster Bennett, BB King, and Fleetwood Mac was the bill, and they played like, I think, 5 or 6 shows across England, and at the end of the night they would jam. And that's one of those things that like, as to the Munich tapes, you think to yourself, okay, well, somebody taped the Fleetwood Mac set at the Royal Albert Hall. Did anybody at any of the other gigs tape the whole show? I mean, I'd love just to hear BB King's set from that night. What was he playing?
Right.
You think about how many songs did Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac do that were BB King songs. Well, my assumption is if you're touring with somebody, you don't do their material. Like, that's just rude. So, but again, as far as I know, there's no tapes in circulation.
What about the BB King in London?
Well, that was the one, and Peter Green
Caledonia,
was really
right?
Not in good shape at that session. I don't think he really, shone on that at all. Had he had the opportunity, I'm sure BB King would have been more than happy to, give him a larger share of the spotlight. But they ended up using just a very small piece of one of Green's solos on one track.
Right.
And it's like, well, I'm sure he didn't come in and play, a couple of bars and then go home. And it's just a shame that he didn't have the opportunity the way that, he was able to work with Eddie Boyd or Otis Spann. I mean, that could have been contractual also.
What about the Peter Barnes solo thing? I mean, it's not a great record, but the guitar playing is
it's fantastic.
Incredible.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed that.
My friend Bruce Thomas is on it too.
Yes. And yeah, that was a set that I very much enjoyed.
That was after he left the band, correct?
Yes. Yeah, he did like a whole flurry of guest sessions shortly after leaving. And again, I would have, I would have loved to have been able to find more information as to who, how these things came together. Like how did you meet these guys? Like he did a couple of tracks with Toe Fat.
Right.
And it's like, okay, who did you meet? Who in that band did you meet that you were like, they were like, hey, you want to come in the studio and just, do some recording with us? And he was like, yeah, okay. Country Joe McDonald, he does some wonderful playing on that album.
What album's that?
What was it? Hold On, I'm Coming. When it originally was released, he was not credited. He was listed as Rockhead on the liner notes. Yeah, I don't know who came up with that one. But
he's not credited on BB King in London either.
On the original vinyl, because I know he is on the CD. It's possible that on the original vinyl he wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think he was.
Yeah, because when I'm talking about the McDonald, it was on the original vinyl. He was just listed as Rockhead, and they didn't even get the credits right. Like, no, you said he played on this song. That's not him playing. You can distinctly hear his tone on another track, and they have somebody else listed as guitar, and it's like, no, that's definitely Peter Green.
And you just touched on a thing that I want to say, and Andrew, we've talked about this before. This was after he left Fleetwood Mac, right?
Right.
He didn't have his Les Paul anymore, but he still had that tone.
He still had that sound.
I just want to make sure we clear that up.
Yep.
Behind you, so do I, Andrew. But Bruce Thomas got the book. And oops.
There you go.
And Thomas's quote, he said Peter was wearing the same thing when he did the Peter Barnes studio.
I'm sorry, I broke up.
There we go.
Yeah, it seems to be some interference.
There we go. We're back.
Okay, cool.
But he said he was wearing the same outfit. So that was, what, a year later?
Yeah.
He washed his clothes.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. So one thing I want to call out, too, is that we were talking before. We are having a jam for Fleetwood Mac in February in Evanston, Illinois. Hopefully Richard will be joining us. Curtis has been on the show before. He's going to be one of the guitarists. We're going to be playing some Fleetwood Mac songs. Peter Green, Danny Kerwin. We're playing with Dave Spector, who is a Chicago blues musician.
Yep.
You should check him
Excellent.
out. And we're also probably going to play one of the interviews, too, that you got to see.
Oh, great.
Richard, in between, so other people can see. It'll be a book signing. I'm trying to get Jeff to get his trumpet out so we can do some Chicago songs. We can play trumpet. But yeah, that's going to be February 12th. One thing that I will say too, that Richard brought up, and Richard, thank you for your review. Anybody who's gotten our book or who is getting our book, please review it on Amazon. Good, bad, or indifferent. We want to hear from you.
Very good.
As Andrew knows with his channel, going back to when you had 600 people on when I was on the first time, it's really important for the reviews. So even, like it, don't like it, whatever your comment is, Richard was kind enough to put his review on there, and thank you kindly for that. But please look at Amazon. Even if you didn't get it there, you're free to review it there.
And also too, ladies and gentlemen, you know, if you're watching live and on a replay, grab these links. You know, this link here that I'm going to put there in the chat of Richard's website. Put that on your social media accounts and generate some chatter there. That helps as well, and also the same thing too with Bob and Jeff's book. Just put a link, and you'll be surprised actually, you know, what kind of connection that's going to do for getting that word out, which is so important. Because look, at the end of the day, the real growth of things is going to happen through the organic fans, through guys like us and folks and girls like us who just love this music. And I think that's one of the great things. And at the top of the show, we were talking about social media before, weren't we? About how Richard got an opportunity at Bob and Jeff's book signing here to meet a lot of people in person, because he'd been speaking to them for 15 years, Bob, through social media. So it's a great thing, you know. You got a guy like me here in New Zealand chatting with, at the moment now, with two guys from the States, with 24 people around the world watching and listening and contributing to what we're doing here. From that perspective, it's mind-blowing. It's still, it's still kind of, you know, I was born back in the day when you would write postcards and letters, Bob.
Yeah, and if we send it to you, you get it in a month.
Yeah.
Because we should let everybody know, if everybody didn't see it, Andrew's book was in customs in New Zealand for what, 2.5 weeks?
I saw that.
Weeks.
Yeah.
2.5 weeks. So
and it's a book.
But it's a book.
Yeah.
But you know, we're going to talk more about this book on the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I know the Rock Professor has got his copy. So you know, we consider we're on a mission to spread Fleetwood Mac and Peter Green, especially, you know, and that's what we'll do on this channel. And we hope if you're watching here live, it'll be really, really nice for Richard to have an inbox full of people requesting links for you to go and download the 3 volumes. I highly recommend it. I think if you want to read something that has attention to detail, but shines from the love of a fan's perspective, it's a remarkable read. Go out there and get yourself a copy.
I would consider it a Bible for any Peter Green Fleetwood Mac fan. Really.
Thank
seriously.
you, Bob.
I mean that. And the other thing I have to do, call out, because I know Jeffrey is listening. In the beginning of our book, there is an email address called collectorprints@gmail.com. You can email Jeff Lowenthal directly. Say, hey, I want a print of page 53. And you will get a print from Jeff that will be from the original negative from the book. So I want to make sure that people know that in the cover of the book, the email address is there. I'm sure Andrew will post it there too, but
Yes.
That is there. So let's fill up Richard and Jeff's email address and let's bust their email.
I'll make sure we talk about that too. That's a very, very good point. Thank you, Bob. And we're going to be back live on the channel with our Christmas show in a couple of hours' time. So we've sent out a whole lot of links, ladies and gentlemen, to people that you're all familiar with, and a lot of people that have been in our chat over the last couple of years. It's a great opportunity to jump on, wish everybody a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that kind of stuff. You can stay on for as long as you want or for as briefly as you want. It's going to be some kind of controlled mayhem, Bob. Hopefully we'll, you know, it'll be controlled. But if anybody here is watching that wants to come on that I haven't emailed you a link to, put a comment on this show, and after I have some lunch, I'll come back and I'll get you a link, or come back when we're live and ask, and I'll send you a link to come on and join us. But it's been a privilege and an honour to have Bob once again, who has a permanent invitation to our channel.
Good for you.
And you, Richard, to come on and talk about your
Thank
book.
you so much.
And you have a permanent invitation. Any project you're working on in the future, if you want to come on and share it with us.
Can I interrupt 1 second, Andrew?
Sure.
One thing that Richard said, and we can use you as a platform, Richard. let people let Richard know how you would like to see more from him about the Danny Kerwin version of Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
So your wife's gonna kill us.
That'll be great, and that's good, and like I say, Richard, thank you for coming on and talking.
Thank you for having me, and Bob, thank you for making me do this. I had no idea how much I would actually enjoy it, and I really have, and I appreciate it, both of you.
Thank you, Richard. Good guy, and I wish everybody a happy holiday.
Yes, the best to you and yours, absolutely.
Okay, so before we go, everybody, I'm going to just scroll up quickly and say hi to everybody, and we'll see you back here in a couple of hours if you want. So, Anders, thank you very much for joining us. We're Facebook friends. Particularly enjoy your posts. Thank you for accepting my Facebook friendship. Holly Lewis, another good friend of the channel. Hugh Caldwell from Scotland. Good to see you, brother. Christopher Conklin, very, very, very active Facebook Peter Green fan. Check out Christopher Conklin on Facebook, folks. Thank you for joining our channel and supporting the channel too, Christopher. We appreciate that. Tom McCourt, sorry. Thank you, Tom. Fantastic. Thank you. Peggy, good to see you, brother. We'll see you soon. I've sent you a link for the show. Paul P., thank you for jumping on. Holly Lewis, we've got Holly there. I think Bent Tom, another good friend of the channel. Thank you, Bent, for jumping on. We had Brody Hutchings. Thank you, Brody. We had Fruitcake Tony and Denise S. If I've missed anybody, please forgive me. I don't normally do the shout-outs. It's the Rock Professor who does that. But if I've missed anyone, forgive me.
Well, Richard and I have to shout out to somebody who didn't make it, and we're both a little ticked off, I think.
Sure.
And you know who I'm talking about, Richard. So go ahead.
No, I'll let you take that one. Let you take that one.
We want to say hi to Amy. I'm sure she'll see it on the replay, but we're waiting for her to heckle Richard all program.
Awesome, fantastic, Amy. Another good friend of the channel as well. One of the admins on our Facebook group as well. So special shout out to Amy. Thank you for all the hard work that she does over there. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to give you the last word, Richard, and then we'll cruise. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you. This really was a wonderful experience, and I look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's Richard. I will say again, check out Richard's book. It's an ebook. It's really a bargain.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care now.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.